Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton with Good Virtual Reality here, and thanks for giving us your time today. In case you're new here, you can become a subscriber at goodvirtualreality.com. Many episodes of this podcast head out over email first to paid subscribers before publishing everywhere. Thank you to my founding members, paid subscribers, sponsors, and the donations I've received, supporting the production of this independent journalism directly. Today, I'm joined by Daniel Sproll at Realities.io. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us where you're tuning in from today?
I'm Daniel, co-founder and CEO of Realities.io, probably most known for Puzzling Places, but we've been running since 10 years and I'm in VR even longer, 12 years or so. My background is in cognitive science. Happy to join you today.
We've got a little bit of a journey to discuss today on how you ended up building Puzzling Places and the overall trends in 3D computer vision, I guess. You didn't start off building a game at first. How did you end up building a game here?
We totally did not start in gaming, doing a semester abroad at a lab in Vancouver and there researching human navigational behavior with these big old headsets. That was before the DK1 came about. With Realities.io, when we started in 2016, we actually started a company to explore combining photogrammetry, so 3D scanning using normal photography, normal photos, and VR. So bringing real-world places into VR through 3D scanning in a very photorealistic way. Built a lot of tech, and that was more straightforward, funny enough, than the actual applications, because the question that we always ask ourselves, okay, where can we add the most value with this? Like bringing real-world places into VR. We've tried out many things over the years, tourism approaches where we bring you to places that you can't go to otherwise. We've worked on social impact projects, especially like Home After War, or even collaborations with big brands like Meta and Audi. It was by accident that we ended up making a game. One of the steps when importing the scans that we had in our pipeline was segmenting it into several separate pieces, which you do for performance reasons. So you only have to render the pieces that are in front of you. You save yourself the headroom of rendering what's behind you and some other performance wins that you get from that. And usually the pieces would just align perfectly on the edges. So you don't see that it's separate pieces. But that day we had a bug in the pipeline and the pieces were all jumbled up. And then Shah, our graphics programmer at the time, he was like, why don't we just ship it and let people puzzle it together? And we laughed first, and then there was a moment of silence and we looked at each other and we're like, this is actually an interesting idea. Could be a really cool game mechanic. And the reason why we were so excited about it, I think, is because we were looking for years and years of a scalable way to use photogrammetry assets, because we were really good at producing these assets and producing them fairly efficiently. What we always lacked was like something cool to do with them that is fun and that is engaging, because we found out if you just like drop people one-to-one into these scans, it's fun for about 30 seconds and then they all go, what can we do? There was this whole process of us trying to, okay, what if we add more information? Yeah, it's a bit better, but not great. What if we add storytelling? Yeah, it's really cool, but then it takes a lot of effort to build these experiences and it's really hard to monetize them. When we came across this funny little accident, we were immediately drawn to it because there's this very like cool basic mechanic of puzzling that is just really fun and engaging and has proven itself for like over 200 years. And bringing that into VR, combining it with what we were really good at, is in the end how Puzzling Places was born. We built a prototype, published that on SideQuest back then, and people really liked it. So we set out to actually develop the game.
I'm glad you covered the entire journey there. You also have a flat version out now as well, right?
Yeah, that's true.
How has that launch gone? And explain that sort of thinking, and how does the reach compare to the VR version?
Puzzling Places is a game that works really well in VR, right? A lot of people always said, it's like, oh yeah, it's an example of one of these games that doesn't really work in 2D. We were a bit hesitant, but like at some point we decided, okay, it's just really tough right now with VR to reach a big enough audience and to continue reaching new players. We're really good with making assets for this game. We're going to continue making it. Why don't we try to build a 2D version? So we can just like reach a wider audience and also offer a way to play Puzzling Places for the people who maybe don't always want to wear a headset. Putting on the headset is always a bit of a friction moment. You can do that if you have some time at home, but maybe if you're just like on the go somewhere and you want to play on a Steam Deck, that's a totally different setting. So there were like a couple of reasons why we decided to explore this route. Again, we had built an early prototype just for the fun of it, and that was fun to play. I showed it to a bunch of people. They ended up playing quite a bit. And so we're like, okay, let's do this. It was a quite long journey though to really get it right, because it's just really hard. The interaction, the interface design, it's a really tough problem. Because what is so easy in VR, manipulating something with 6 degrees of freedom, you can rotate the pieces, you can move them in depth, you have the 3D perception. A lot of that is much harder when you play the game on a 2D screen with 2D inputs like mouse and keyboard or gamepad. It took us quite a while to get to a place where we're happy with it. We learned a lot when we did our Apple Vision Pro port, because that was kind of like 2.5D, because you didn't really have the ability to move it back and forth. So there's a lot of inspiration from that in the interface design now. It is a different game, plays a bit differently. And we have the classic mode, which is more like what people know from Puzzling Places. And then we have what we call the journey mode, which is like a easier version that we then also brought to VR. In terms of like, how did the launch go? It went okay. It's below our initial projections of what we hoped we would achieve. But launching a Steam game these days it's just hard. It's a discoverability problem first and foremost. Reaching players is tough. We were able to reach some new players, but yeah, I mean, I think we had around 15,000 wishlists at launch. The conversion during the launch went well. The people who actually saw the game and were interested in it, they also then went on to get the game. We just hoped that we would reach more people. It's a gamble on Steam. You roll the dice. Sometimes you hit, on a good day, you hit front page with a game during launch, and then suddenly you're orders of magnitude different in your sales, and other days you do not. So a lot of moving parts. But it still felt like a thing we should try. And we wanted to try. And so I'm happy that we did.
So I appreciate you sort of running that through and being upfront with the sort of expectations versus reality there. I had Sean Whiting, who was managing community at Rec Room for many years, and he walked through that whole journey. And a game like that, where they've reached every possible person that has a headset, basically, and then realizing, where do we go from here?
We didn't reach every person with a headset. VR gaming is a niche still. And within VR gaming, our audience is actually quite a bit older. The peak demographic that we have is between 45 and 55, and we have around 10 to 11% players over 65. So it's a more mature, older audience, not the people who play Gorilla Tag or something like that. For me, it's mind-blowing that they aren't there to begin with, and that they love the game, and that are the ones who keep purchasing new puzzles when we bring them out every month and have the subscription and all that stuff. For them, it really brings a lot of value. We always joke it's actually less of a game and more of a meditation app in disguise for a lot of people. But of course, there are only so many of these people who have headsets. The whole industry feels the lack of new people coming in. And then at the same time, the churn of people who get a headset and then put it in the cupboard is just fairly high. You can see that curve every January, February, March. See how the activation numbers plummet when it goes towards summer. And then rise again in Q4. The Quest 3 was the last time when I felt there was a really massive push of new people coming in. With the Quest 3S, we just didn't see that kind of movement.
I've been covering Jigsaw Night quite a bit. I really enjoy their take on 2D puzzling. The dev there, Steve Lucas, sort of has been targeting the idea of bringing people who just love jigsaw puzzles into VR, sort of convincing them to buy a headset for his game. And it's hard.
We have the same idea, right? There are people who have written these reviews to us of like, hey, this is a game worth getting a headset for, and you guys should like get commissioned by Meta. It's just tough getting people to make two of these buying decisions, and one of it being $500 buying decision. It's tough. It's just not something that a lot of people can do, which is why we hope having it as a 2D version would help there. But then that comes with its own challenges of a very full marketplace with thousands of games launching on Steam every year.
The other topic I wanted to get into here in a minute is asking you about coming full circle to this idea that 3D capture is much easier now than it was when you started, and where you think that sort of takes us in the near future. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about the Vision Pro and about the Steam Frame. On Vision Pro, there are multiple modes of play. Does it share space with other apps? And is there also a fully immersive mode? Explain that for people that don't understand how the Vision OS operates.
So the Vision OS version of Puzzling Places is a bit of an odd one. It's very different to the game on most other platforms, even more different than the 2D version, I would say. The reason behind this is that when we were developing the game, there was no Unreal Engine support whatsoever. However, Puzzling Places is developed in Unreal Engine. To launch something on the Vision Pro, we had to rebuild the entire game in Unity within like a few months. So we kind of like reduced it down a lot. And we also wanted to build something that is native to the platform, because Vision Pro has very different interaction paradigms than SideQuest and other VR headsets. There's a volume that you interact with that is shared in the space, and you also interact at a distance. It's very gaze-driven, and your hand just gives a little bit of additional input instead of fully grabbing a piece and moving it. We built a very different version there. There's no immersive mode. It's only in a volume, basically. And but yeah, we have very little content there also, just because it sold very poorly, even though we got featuring from Apple and everything. My feeling was just like there was not a lot of install base to begin with, and the install base that was there was not that interested in gaming. They were more interested in kind of like productivity apps and so on.
The reason I wanted to sort of talk about Steam Frame as well is, in theory, on Steam Frame, the VR version and the flat version should both run. And which do you expect to be used more?
If you put on the headset, I think you will want to get the immersive experience. I don't see a world where people will play the flat version on the headset. One of the basic ideas that we have at the studio is like, it sucks to put on a VR headset. I think that's a very healthy attitude to have as a developer. You have to understand that putting on a VR headset is a lot of friction for a player. To make it worth it, you have to have a app that brings enough value for them to justify that. And for some people, that is working out in Beat Saber. For other people, that's hanging out with their friends in Gorilla Tag. And for some people, it's playing their weekly puzzles while they hang out with their spouse on the couch to chill and relax. That's Puzzling Places. We mainly built the 2D version as a lower friction entry point. If someone has a Steam Frame and they already went through the friction, and then they can choose between the higher immersive, more fluent R version of the game versus the 2D version, I think this decision is very clear. Data remains to be seen, so we'll see. But I would be very surprised.
All very logical sort of info there. The reason I wanted to cover that ground is the model of operating system that we see in Vision OS fits with me. It makes a lot of sense. There's very few apps on Vision OS that are good enough that they demand full immersion. I'm going to drop everything else I'm doing and go to a hand tracking only experience for an hour on end and get rid of my movies and my productivity and just go into the space. There's nothing really on the platform that does that. 90% of the time, maybe 99% of the time, I'm in the shared space where I've got maybe a volume or two floating around and then 4 or 5 windows floating in front of me. And again, in theory, Puzzling Places from Steam Link could hypothetically be one of those things. The flat version of the game could be one of those 5 windows that I have up. To your point, like, I lose so much.
We had these discussions internally as well. And I think it's an interesting discussion because there are some games that are made to be played on the side. Interesting concepts on Steam of games that live at the bottom of your screen where you like tend a little farm or something like that while you do stuff. I'm intrigued by these concepts, and I think it's kind of like a little fidget toy. This is how we were conceptualizing. And there is like, AVP is kind of like great for these kind of things. I don't like playing Puzzling Places this way. Puzzling Places is kind of like a meditation app in disguise. Going in there and tuning everything else out is one of the benefits that you get, because you can get into this flow state of building a puzzle and just winding down and thinking consciously about things, but just entering this loop of pattern recognition and connecting and diving into the soundscape. And this is how you will get the best experience. Even when playing on 2D, I think also you don't want to play it on the side, context switching in and out the whole time, but like you get the best experience when you get into this flow state and when you really dedicated your full attention. There is interesting design philosophies behind Apple Vision Pro and Steam Frame. I'm terribly excited that with Steam Frame, I think for the first time, we have a standalone headset that is only for games. It doesn't try to do anything else. It's only for games. It's made by Valve, makes their money selling games. It's aligned in that sense with the developers who make the games. And with Meta, over the years, we had so many pushes to like, maybe it's more lifestyle, maybe it's more media consumption, maybe it's more productivity, maybe it can also do MR apps. It always tries to be many things at the same time. That makes it lose focus. And Steam Frame is going to be unapologetically a gaming device. And whether that works or not, we will see. But I'm really happy that someone is finally testing that hypothesis and making a device that is only that.
Fascinating. And I so appreciate the comment about focus. and about the idea of it being a meditation app in disguise. That means you've got a lot of competition for focus. Every other app that tries to do what you're doing or takes over attention is an app that you're competing with. It's so difficult that every dev is competing for this limited amount of time.
Yeah.
That you have to spend in headset.
There was this crazy slide deck by Matthew Bell that all the games coming out in a year, they compete for 12% of playtime, and playtime is going down. Why is it 12% of playtime? The other 88% of playtime are taken up by forever games like Minecraft, Fortnite, whatever this year's Call of Duty or Madden or FIFA is. And they slurp up most of the time. If you make a new game, you're competing for 12% of total playtime. There we have the stats, but for every other segment like VR gaming, it's the same. And then there has been this year's Matthew Bell deck. He actually put out the really interesting observation that young males are playing computer games less and less. So they just went to betting and OnlyFans because there they get their dopamine kick unmediated. So it's basically gambling and porn. They're just not interested in video gaming anymore. Then there's TikTok, which is taking up huge amount of time and attention. We are living in a time where there is an oversupply in ways to be entertained and ways to spend your time. And so, which makes it even more important that whatever game or app you're building is really valuable for someone and is really helping them with something that is important to them. We're super happy that we found a niche with puzzling places that we really appreciate building for. We love cultural heritage, we love 3D scanning, we love little storytelling in these dioramas, and we found a fan base that really is into that stuff, and we can provide something that feels really valuable for them.
I love that. Let's make sure I've got it on the record here, just for people who might not be familiar. What is Puzzling Places, and can you walk through what's in the app?
Yeah, Puzzling Places is a very simple app. It's 3D jigsaw puzzling. We take a lot of real places, lately also more CG places, and you get a 3D model that is chopped up in puzzle pieces that you then have floating in front of you, and you can just put them together. So it's the same jigsaw puzzling that you know from 2D, like physical jigsaw puzzling, but the pieces are 3D and you're building a little diorama. And then, of course, we can do some things that you cannot do with physical jigsaw puzzle. We have beautiful soundscapes that bring the place to life while you build it. So, if you complete the clock tower, you will hear the clock. If you complete the little creek running next to it, you will hear the murmuring of that water. Lately, we've also been pushing more and more for adding animations, little characters, storytelling, little details to discover. There's never an epic story that we're telling you actively. It's just environmental storytelling, passive storytelling, things you can discover. The idea is that we take you all around the world and you get to see places both well-known, like we have the pyramids, we have the Sphinx, we have Mont Saint-Michel, we have these famous places, but we also have random back alleys in Tokyo or scans from Estonia or places that you would probably never end up visiting. We bring out new puzzles every month, have a fun new puzzle for you to play. You can choose to get a pack that you like or not. The base game comes with a bunch of puzzles that give you a great overview of what it is. And so if you enjoy it, you can decide if you want to get more. It's chill, it's relaxed. I say that it's a meditation app and it's all about flow and just going at your own pace, no pressure, no timers.
So coming back to the subject I wanted to get into earlier of 3D capture, did this market for capturing scenes come together in the way that you expected? Has it taken longer than you expected for us to be able to sort of capture scenes ourselves and show them to people? You talked about that at the beginning when you were talking about arriving at the design of this game and realizing that there's hard limits on how much people want to spend in a capture of a certain kind. And I wanted to unfold that.
We did a classical engineering mistake. We were thinking a lot about look, we can capture and we can bring it into VR, and that has to be worth something. That's just a cool thing to do. But it turns out a 3D capture is worth very little without a reason why people should look at it. We spend a lot of time finding what are reasons for people to look at this stuff. Why would people want to have a 3D capture? What would they do with it? And of course, you can start picking that apart and okay, there's entertainment reasons. There is more business-oriented reasons. I know by now a lot of people who do, for example, they scan a bridge and then they send it to the people who need to maintain that bridge, and they can identify, where are structural weak points, where's the paint coming off, for inspection kind of reasons, for looking at construction sites. I know a guy in Croatia who's underwater scanning harbor basins, and like they have a whole company doing only that and then making decent money with scanning these basins. Why do they scan them? They need to find out where is trash, where does it need to get excavated again to allow bigger ships come in and all these kind of things. So there's a lot of these very special niche cases, but we ended up not going in that direction. It's a very highly specialized direction and you need to be very good at finding your clients. We were more drawn into a kind of more entertainment direction, and just giving someone a 3D scan is not worth much. Like look at Sketchfab. Sketchfab is like the YouTube of 3D scans, right? Or like 3D objects. There's amazing content on there. You can go on the website now at Sketchfab. The viewing numbers of these things are just really low because no one just looks at a 3D scan and is like, oh, cool 3D scan. Like we look at 3D scans because we are looking for the next puzzle and we get a lot of stuff from Sketchfab, but you need to wrap it up in some activity. And for us, that ended up being puzzling. Took some of our scans, we made some scans, and we licensed a lot of scans to put them into puzzling places because now suddenly there was a game mechanic around it, something that people enjoyed doing, and puzzles ended up being the content. The market for 3D scanning, it's many different niches that have this requirement, and they are united by the technologies used, but not so much by the use cases. I mean, something that is of course coming up now is like a whole shift in from photogrammetry, which is a bit more cumbersome. You have to know how to take the photos. I always compare it to analog photography, where you go to the field, you take a lot of photos, you take them home, you process them, check if the scan worked out. It's like when you develop the pictures and then you know maybe it didn't work and you have to go back and redo it. And now we get like more stuff like Gaussian splatting and scanning on your mobile phone and so on. There's Scanniverse by Niantic, for example, and Reality Scan that got purchased by Epic. There's a lot more interactive things where you see the result much quicker, or like even interactively sometimes. But even that, I feel, has not led to a breakthrough. It's always very niche communities who like to just like capture places and share them. And I always have the feeling that they enjoy more the capture than there are people who enjoy looking at. You always have to give people a reason why you look at stuff. And this is actually one of the big pitches that we have when we license scans, is we can tell people like, hey, look, you put a lot of effort in to do that because it's your hobby or because it's your job or something. And we have a community of hundreds of thousands of people who want to actually look at 3D scans in detail.
I love that. That is so interesting. I'm watching what happened with Meta over the last year. They killed Horizon Worlds in VR. They kept the mobile experience sort of on life support. So it's still there and they still believe in it for some reason. Not really sure why. I'm sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop there and have them kill the flat screen experience as well. So they kept Horizon Hyperscape alive, and that's the capturing your environment app. They took away, I believe, the multiplayer aspect of it using the very simple avatars that they have stopped developing. And then when I visited Meta's research labs several years ago, I saw their codec avatars and how high fidelity those can be and how incredible they can be. They've been sort of marching closer and closer and closer to these full body captures that fully track your body movements and really feel like you inside of VR. And you put it all together and it really feels like they're going to go all in on this idea of capturing your living space and capturing your face and your body, using those as your avatar and as your home space inside of VR. And you can invite other people to visit your home space as a future version of the Meta operating system. Am I wrong on the overall vision there on where Meta is going, or do you think that's the direction, given all you've learned about these technologies?
I think you're right that is their vision. If you would have asked me like 5 to 8 years ago, I would have given you the cheeky answer. It's like, why would you go into VR and just represent the real world if you could do, all sorts of like crazy stuff and have like bunny ears and like meet at the top of a mountain? I've become a bit more aware that for like a lot of people, they are more interested in having a bit more down-to-earth experiences. For example, I think that is one of the strongest features of the Vision Pro is the avatars and live presence that feels less uncanny and just more real. I think that's definitely the direction with the avatars. With Hyperscape, I'm much more skeptical. I can see a need being there for people to like scan their own places and represent them and get people to come. I'm not sure if that is very similar to what we did with realities in the beginning, our first app. Is it going to be this kind of thing where like this is cool for about 30 seconds and then the excitement of it wears off? Is it one of these gimmicky things? The problem with Hyperscape is also just like at the moment, they're rendering this on their servers. It's insanely expensive, probably, which is why they've also never unlocked it for Europe. So like Hyperscape, I think to this day was only available in the US, probably due to latency questions. I'm not sure how big the value is of having that. Maybe that is something where time will tell. With the avatars, I'm feeling much more bullish on that. That is going to be a big thing when that works.
Got it. Okay, so I think we're getting near the end of this podcast here, and I need to get you my questions that I ask all my guests and ask you what you think the future of the VR market holds and what you're planning to do next. But going back to the beginning, what was your first VR experience? How did you get into this in the first place?
I think my first VR experience was, I was like 12 or something. I was on a US trip with my mom and we were at an arcade and there was this wall and there was this VR, super huge, clunky old VR version headset thing. And it was Star Wars themed and you would be like the rebel and like at the end you would meet Darth Vader and had to fight Darth Vader. And I was like, oh my God, I was a huge Star Wars fan at that time. So I was like, oh my God, I have to do this. And so we were standing in line. It was a super long line. But I was like, oh man, I have to do this. And while we were standing in line, I got cold feet because in my mind, I started picturing all this stuff of like, man, I'm going to be in there and I have to like fight Darth Vader. And that sounds really scary all of a sudden because in my mind, it was all like super real. Like I would literally enter this thing and have to face down Darth Vader. Eventually it was my turn and I was like very close to bailing out, but like pulled through. And then I put on the headset and it felt like 5 pixels on the screen moving back and forth. And I was so utterly disappointed. It was a really good lesson. A core problem of VR is it's a technology that people can project a lot of stuff into because we always tell, it's like being real and you're becoming that person and you're doing this thing. The expectations are almost endless because we just fill them up in our heads. And then it's almost when people try it, they can only be disappointed that there are still limitations. And I mean, we've gotten a lot better, but it's still, of course, not perfect.
Wonderful. Can you think of your favorite moment of presence in a headset? If you had to pick out one memory as your favorite moment in VR, what would it be?
Maybe like 2016, 17 or so, when we had just set up our office in Berlin. I had a friend over. We had two Vive headsets and we were playing Serious Sam. And like there was a Serious Sam co-op version that you could play in VR where you would just be next to each other and it was this wave shooter and we set up the play space so we were actually physically next to each other. And we just ended up playing the whole night through this like onslaught of the end. We were just like so in it, trying to beat the final boss, super sweaty because it was a hot day. And it just felt like such a cool shared experience. So physical, so intense and so new at that time because there was not that much multiplayer VR. That was just so cool when we finally made it. So it was just such a high and such a cool experience. What I hope VR would be on an entertainment level is like this very cool, very unique, very out there, intense experience with a friend together.
What's the next year look like for Realities.io, and what do you think about the state of the VR market and where we're going to go in the near future?
It's not an easy time. I mean, we have some headsets coming up with Steam Frame being the next in line. I told you that I'm excited about Steam Frame. It's one of the most comfortable headsets I've ever worn, and it's a cool headset. It's the first one that is only gaming. I do think those going to be very, very expensive. Just seeing how much the Steam machine is. Like, I don't know how much it will be, but like, I'm afraid it's going to be too expensive for its own good just because of the hardware prices. And I don't think it's going to move significant numbers. I think the best case scenario of Steam Frame is just going to like rekindle the PC VR and like non-meta VR kind of crowd, have a look again and maybe get whatever headset they have out of the cupboard. But I don't see it moving big numbers. Maybe it's similar to Steam Deck. Steam Deck never sold big numbers, but like I think it always was a oversized presence in the market and the way it shifted the market. We have some like Pico Swan and maybe some other headsets coming out in the near future that they're still riding this wave of Apple Vision Pro competitors. We're in this weird position where Apple Vision Pro kind of flopped. It's a good device, but it never made big numbers. It's an interesting vision of what Apple sees spatial computing as and all that, but it never really did much for the developers in terms of install base and moving numbers. And I think with these upcoming headsets being in a similar vein, just like priced fairly highly, probably. I don't have much more information than all of you guys there, but this is the direction that I'm seeing going. It feels weird that they're probably just going to flop as much as Apple did because like these brands cannot get people to buy like super expensive headsets either. There are some really interesting developments with ergonomics, which is is still a huge limiting factor. I'm just really waiting for another cheap, light device that really hits the mass market, like Quest 3 did when it came out. And in terms of like, what is our plan? So we're going to continue supporting Puzzling Places. We're having a lot of fun with that. We're very blessed to have an awesome community that supports us and still purchase our content. And then we're also very happy that we're still in Horizon Plus, which gives us access to the last curated pod in the store, makes it still valuable and viable for us to continue producing content and make new stuff that's pushing our boundaries. It's super fun. We are exploring new games and new stuff, but honestly, we just haven't found anything that made me so excited and feel strongly enough about it to risk trying it, because launching anything new right now is just very scary. It's a very scary prospect because the stores are so much fuller than when we launched Puzzling Places. You have to have something that you really believe in. But we'll continue exploring and see if we can find something.
I love that reality check. I was nodding along as you were saying all of those things about Pico Swan, the idea that Vision Pro is an interesting vision for what they want it to be, but also just a very limited price, limited weight, limited offering.
Yeah, I think a lot of these multi-purpose headsets have not demonstrated their usability, their value yet. For gaming, it's a fairly known thing. If you make it cheap enough and you deliver something that is good at gaming and it doesn't have to do that much else, I think it's just a more understandable scenario for me. These productivity headsets, I just haven't seen it work yet. Either be like, okay, I'm just going to do one thing, which is what the more gaming-focused headsets are doing, or this multitasking productivity thing, which is just much more complex.
When I'm watching movies, I'm rarely just watching a movie. I'm also scrolling my phone a lot of the time, especially when I'm watching a movie at home, not when I'm out at the theater. Very often when I'm playing a game on my phone or on my Steam Deck, I've got a movie on in the background. So I'm very rarely these days ever doing a single activity at once. I've got something on the foreground and then something in the background. That's also competition for these focused VR experiences. That's competition for the meditative moments you're trying to create.
You design differently for these kind of things. The word for it is cognitive load. How much cognitive load do you design your game for? And do you want something that engulfs you fully, like something that is very complex and very intense, has this flow state? You can do it in many different ways. Or do you have something that is like a background kind of activity that more easily pairs with other things? It's interesting because as a VR developer, I sometimes felt that was one of the most beautiful things that we are given is the player's entire attention. You're given for a limited amount of time the person's entire attention, and you can design for that and make something for that, which I find very beautiful because, as you pointed out, it's something that is extremely rare these days. Not even blockbuster movies can get that.
I love it. What a fantastic conversation, Daniel. Thank you for the time and good luck in the future. We'll talk to you later.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Take care.